All right, folks, at the box office this week, the Idris Elba, Matthew McConaughey movie, Dark Tower, was #1 at the box office, grossing over $19.1 million in its first week. The moving from #1 to #2 was the wartime thriller Dunkirk, brought in $17.1 million. Of course, Girls Trip, of course, still going strong, did $11.4 million. Again, grossing more than $85.4 million bucks over its run so far. But one of the movies, of course, folks have been talking about is the movie Detroit. That's a movie that deals with an issue that took place in 1967 that was a part of the riots there. Now, did not do well at all, got lots of positive reviews, had an A+ cinema score rating from folks who attended the movie, but it pulled in just $7.3 million in its debut weekend. And that has led to lots of discussion, lots of controversy, because the movie was directed by Academy Award-winning filmmaker Kathryn Bigelow. And so the question is this here, that people have been dealing with, as to whether or not somebody white can direct a film about something that happened to black folks. Here's Bigelow talking about why she wanted to take on this subject.
When I was first introduced to it, it was right around the time of Ferguson, Missouri. And I'm thinking, this is 50 years ago today, and yet it's happening today. It's happening tomorrow. It's happening, you know, it's recurring far too often. And so I hope that it could perhaps invite a dialogue to encourage a bridge between an incredible racial divide in this country.
All right, folks, let's break this thing down, because again, there's been lots of discussion, lots of pieces written about it. Folks have been talking about this on social media. Joining us from Detroit is Rochelle Rowley. She is a columnist with the Detroit Free Press. Rochelle is also, folks, the author of the book, The Burden, African Americans and the Enduring Impact of Slavery. And also joining us early in Los Angeles is Felicia Henderson. She is the creator, executive producer for a variety of TV shows, including The Quad. And of course, our panel, Avis Jones-DeWeaver, Brandon Cooper, and Tiffany Lofton. I'll start with you, Felicia. You're in the filmmaking industry. And it's very interesting watching this conversation, because on one hand, folks say, beautifully directed, you really felt the impact of this movie, Detroit. Well, then others are saying, well, she's white, she shouldn't be doing our films. And I guess what's problematic about that is, what do we then say to the authors, Taylor Branch, who wrote a book on Dr. King, David Garrow? What do we say? I mean, I've had authors on this show who've written books about the black experience. What are we actually saying here? Your take on this whole issue?
I think it's so complicated, right? And I think I'm always, the first thing in my mind when I hear, can a white filmmaker or a white writer tell our stories, I always have to think we have to look at them specifically and separately. And I always think of what we are saying about us on the other side of that, because I don't want, to hear white people say, well, they can't tell mainstream stories, they being African Americans. So that's what I'm always concerned about. If we just, paint it all with a very broad brush, then it about, can they tell these stories, as opposed to, did this specific story work? Can she tell this specific story? I'm always concerned about that, because I don't want, the opposite makes me angry, that, when we suffer that same thing in the workspace, where they're like, well, she can't tell this story. What does she know about being an astronaut? Or what does she know about being a rich white person? Or whatever that is, that, I want us to be free to tell any story that we want as well.
Rochelle, one of the subjects of this movie said 95% accurate. Give us what has been the conversation in Detroit? What have folks have been saying about the movie Detroit?
Well, the two biggest things are that this is not entertainment. It's a history lesson, and people don't want to revisit that history. So it's been very hard. I went to the world premiere, and I walked out in tears and watched people taking selfies on the red carpet and having conversations, and I couldn't talk to people. I said, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to talk to you tomorrow. I also think that Felicia is absolutely right. This story, every story, belongs to every American if they tell it right. Can you get a Donald Trump to tell the story of the Algiers motel incident? Of course not. But if you can get somebody to tell the story who knows how, I want every American telling every bit of our hidden history, because we don't just have hidden figures, we have hidden history for a long time. And I think that it's time that every story get told.
Avis, I remember when Spike Lee was highly critical of Hollywood, saying that Norman Jewison should not direct a movie about Malcolm X, yet this was the same guy who directed In the Heat of the Night. I remember when the director who did the movie Get On Up on James Brown, there were people who were saying, well, you know, he didn't really capture the essence of James Brown. What are we actually saying when we have this back and forth, as if you are white or Latino or Asian, that there are movies that you cannot direct? Because let's just be honest, it's not like it's a whole bunch of movies that regarding black folks that are getting made.
Right.
And so what do we then say if somebody goes, okay, you know what, that's fine, no black director, okay, you know what, that's okay, we're not gonna make the movie?
Absolutely, and that is the challenge that we would face if we were to take that sort of absolutist attitude. The reality is that not enough of our stories are being told. And here's the thing, I think people hold so much of our heroes in such high regard. I understand why Spike Lee was concerned about the portrayal of Malcolm X, because we love Malcolm X. We revere his memory, we respect him, and we want him to be treated with respect. The same thing with James Brown, the same thing in this instance. We want our history to be treated with respect. So ultimately, it's really about the quality of the retelling. If the person can retell it in a way that's true, that is authentic, if they actually do the research that's required to be able to tell the story the way it should be told, to me it doesn't matter who tells it, as long as you get it right. Because let me tell you, you could have a black person that could do it, that could get it wrong just as quickly and easily as you could have a white person that would do it that could also get it wrong.
Yeah.
Tiffany, how though can we say to white Americans, learn our history, understand our story, understand our perspective, but then say you can't direct a film? And again, as somebody who is a huge supporter of black directors and black producers and black writers, I support a strong quality. What are we saying when we do that? Because again, I've listened to a lot of these arguments, and I'm going back and forth trying to figure out, like, what the hell are you talking about?
I hear you, Roland. I want to be very critical by saying that this is a very complicated conversation. My favorite book about black folks is written by a white woman, Danielle McGuire, who wrote the book At the Dark End of the Street. That is my favorite book. She's a white woman who wrote a book, she's in Michigan, about black women. However, this conversation, whether it be black Twitter, Roland, or whether it's social media pushing pressure on this, Kathryn is a white woman who is 65 years old from California, who went to Columbia University and who lives in Detroit. I'm sorry, and who made a movie about Detroit. There is something very important that we're missing in this conversation, which is not, do white folks have the right to tell stories about black people? Of course they do. Should they is a different question, and I think that's based off of opinion. My critique on this is white folks have always told the stories and told black people what their history is. In our school books, on TV, they fund and own BET, and there's something very critical that we are missing in the conversation around white supremacy, always telling black people what their story is, how their story should look. And frankly, in the age of the last 2.5 years or 3 years, we've seen so many movies, Hidden Figures, The Butler, we've seen 12 Years a Slave, all the films that have come out, and even Girls Trip. Black TV and black actors and black movies right now are sacred to us in this moment, especially in the age of Donald Trump. And what was triggering is a white woman coming out and telling us, making a movie about black history again. We saw LA 92 that came out not too long ago, and that was a sacred movie, and I'm from Los Angeles. That is a sacred movie to the history of what's happening in that city and why we are in the position that we're in right now. But let's not miss the conversation around white supremacy and white folks telling black people and always what their history may be. Whether it is true or false, that is not the debate. It is the image of...
Hold tight one second.
Go ahead.
I got it. Hold tight one second. I got to go to a break. We're going to pick up this conversation in our next segment. Folks, welcome back to NewsOne Now on TV One as we continue our conversation about the controversy around the movie Detroit. Felicia Henderson, I want to go to you before I go to Brandon to pick up on what Tiffany said. You know, when I understand the criticism, when you talk about movies made about our history, but typically what has happened, Felicia, is that movies about us have been told through the prism of somebody white, meaning the character. I think about Biko. I think about the movie Shaka Zulu. I think about others where you had these stories. So the central character wasn't an African American. It was the white person involved. Some say the movie 42 was told more through the view of Branch Rickey as opposed to Jackie Robinson. So Felicia, just your thoughts on what Tiffany said in the last segment.
I mean, I think that there are lots of examples like what you're describing. And I think of so many of them. And so that for a while you just said, I don't even want to see a movie that is supposed to be our history. I think of even Mississippi Burning, all of those movies, they were always, you know, told through the white savior who comes and saves us from ourselves. And I have no interest in that. And even some that are supposed to be comedies and, you know, or even about sports, often that is the case. And for me, and I think that there were so many of them for a while that as an audience, I think that Black people just started to turn them off. Like, I get it. This is where the, you know, the white character comes and saves me from myself. And I don't have any interest in that. And but I think a movie like, is that what Detroit is doing? I don't think so. You know, knowing one of my actors, Peyton Smith from The Quad, is one of the stars of that. So I got a lot of, you know, sort of insight from it and what his experience was in that. And it is a very, I think, a different thing. Is, you know, is everything that Tiffany said true about white supremacy? Absolutely. But I do also think that you can have someone at the head that if that person is progressive, if that person doesn't think that they have the, you know, the authority and about what my experience is, and is open and who listens to people who actually look like the people who you are depicting, that's a different kind of person, I think, who can listen to other voices who are closer to those that are being depicted. I am open to that. I don't think that's a bad thing. And if Kathryn Bigelow then can get this movie made, and she obviously is a superior filmmaker, is the movie perfect? Absolutely not. But that she can get this movie made and that this story can be told, I think that's important.
So Brandon, I guess one of the questions really also that we talk about here is the issue that Kathryn Bigelow is white and the writer is white, or is the issue, is it good? Because Straight Outta Compton was directed by an African American, but written by whites. And folks said it was great.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's two separate questions. Like Dr. Davis said earlier, it's just as easy as a Black filmmaker to make a horror movie about the Black experience as it is for white. So it's not so much that she was white, as your panelist said. It was. I haven't seen the movie, but I assume it's a good movie from all the ratings I've heard. But at the same time, the perspective will be different. I think that's the question. No doubt about it. The white filmmaker's perspective on the movie will be dramatically different than if there was a Black filmmaker. So it's not to knock Ms. Bigelow and her efforts and her getting the story out there. The question is, how do we get more Black-owned and Black filmmakers to get our story out? That's the solution that we need to be exploring, and not so much knocking her, but trying to figure out a solution to the problem.
But Avis, this is, and I think we have Rochelle back. So let me actually go to Rochelle, then go to Avis. Rochelle, that though I think is a critical issue. So there was so much discussion prior to this movie coming out. First of all, let me also say this here. and there's no disrespect, first of all, with the movie, I think the people who marketed the movie did a horrible job also reaching out to black media. I got an email very late and so you would think that they would have really been flooding the zone, but it's also a whole different issue when you talk about marketing films. But Rochelle, to that particular point, when all of the discussion about Detroit before it comes out is a white woman directing it, and not the actual substance of the movie. Was it good? Was it well directed? Was it well written? Then I think a disservice is done, because then people go, oh man, oh, that white woman directed it, I'm not going to see it, but you might be missing something you have no idea even happened.
Well, my greatest concern, and your panelists have made such good points, is about how we don't tell our own stories. We talk about how we should do it and how it needs to be done, but we're not doing it, which is why there are hidden figures and hidden stories. Mm-hmm. I did see the movie, and I went to see the movie mostly because I knew I would have to see it to write about it. I knew it would be hard. I knew the script. I knew that it was going to spend 40 whole minutes in this hotel, this motel, with these kids being brutalized and then eventually killed. And I think that part of the problem is I talked to people, I interviewed people who are native Detroiters who had never heard of the Algiers motel incident, who didn't know about this. We have been complicit in hiding our history and in not telling these stories. And I think at some point we have to take responsibility for doing that. But I can tell you, after having seen the film, that yes, there are major flaws that I don't know would have been corrected had a black filmmaker done it, but one would hope. For instance, I'm not giving away the whole movie for anybody who still hasn't seen it, but should, to talk about it. And I think it's at the beginning. There's a sort of Schoolhouse Rock cartoon beginning, well, animated beginning, not cartoon, animated beginning that explains 100 years.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
The opening credits that, yes.
It explains all of this brutalization of black folks, all of this discrimination, all of this horrific treatment, literally, in Detroit in about, I don't know, a minute and 30 seconds. And then it opens with this.
Oh, no.
We lost Rochelle Riley there. Go, Felicia, go right ahead. And then I'm going to get final comments from each one of my panel. Felicia, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I know exactly what Rochelle's talking about. That animated opening was, it was a little bit jarring and a little bit out of context and a little bit in tone of this animation. It took away from the gravitas of the story that was to come. And I felt like that those are those kind of little moments where you'll feel like, how come they didn't know that would take away from the story?
Right.
You know, like that's the moment that you go, I wish a black person would have been in the room. You know what I mean?
Right.
It almost turns you off when you see that opening.
Final comments. I got 10 seconds each. Avis, go.
Well, I haven't seen the movie yet either. I certainly am in agreement that we need more black people telling our own stories. I hope that if a white person were to do it, as in this case, they would have enough common sense to hire black consultants, to have black people around them so that they can have that sort of intelligence as they're beginning to produce our stories so that they can, in a way, be able to tell it the right way. That, to me, is the most important imperative.
Brandon.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, as Tiffany made a great point earlier, she does from time to time, that the prism, no, she does a good point. No, it was a good point. But the prism of our history.
Brandon, that was shade.
No,
that was shade.
It was great.
But go ahead. Go ahead.
The history of our Black America has often been told from the perspective of white America. So I definitely agree with that point. And we're talking about K-12 education. 9 times out of 10, the history you're learning about your people was authored by white America, and we definitely need to have a solution to that issue.
Roland, really quick. Creatives are allowed to create. That is their job and that is their gift by God. They are allowed to create. That is their right. However, we need to be very critical as black folks about who tells our stories, not because they may get it right or wrong, but because it is our agency to tell our own stories and our own history and our own culture and to learn our history.
All right, Felicia Henderson, thank you for joining us. Rochelle Riley, sorry we lost the signal a couple of times. Thank you for joining us as well.
Weekdays on TV One.
I will never lie to you.
Oh my God.
Roland Martin.
He doesn't want to talk to us. He wants to ignore us.
Uncensored.
Hell no.
That ain't gonna cut it, boo.
Unapologetic.
No, that is fundamentally false. You are wrong.
Unfiltered.
He wants an America where we all look alike. He ain't talking about black people.
Unrelenting.
You better go work out. because you got a fight on your hands.
NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Weekdays at 7 a.m. on TV1.